Have you ever noticed that the more you know, the harder it becomes to win certain arguments? That there's something deeply wrong when someone who can barely form a coherent argument makes you feel defeated? There's a cruel and fascinating reason for this, and it says more about human nature than you can imagine. Think about it. You're debating someone who clearly doesn't understand the subject. You bring facts, logic, evidence, and yet, somehow inexplicably, you feel like you're losing, not because your arguments are weak, but because the very nature of the conversation has transformed into something you no longer recognize. It's like trying to play chess with someone who's playing checkers, but is convinced they're winning at chess. Intelligence in this context isn't a weapon, it's a burden. Mark Twain once said, "You should never argue with stupid people because they'll drag you down to their level and beat you with experience." That phrase seems funny until you really understand what it means. When an intelligent person enters an argument, they carry an entire arsenal of intellectual responsibility, the need to be precise, to consider nuances, to admit when they're uncertain. But the idiot, they have none of those weights. They can say anything without shame, without fear of being wrong, because for them, being right is simply shouting louder or repeating the same nonsense until it sounds true. And there's the first problem. You're playing a different game. While you're trying to build a bridge of logical reasoning, they're demolishing everything with a hammer of blind conviction. You present evidence. They ignore it. You point out contradictions. They change the subject. You stay calm. They accuse you of being arrogant. Suddenly, you're no longer discussing the original topic. You're defending your character, your intentions, your own sanity. How did we get here? Psychology calls this various things: the Dunning-Kruger effect, cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias. But deep down, it all comes down to one simple and devastating truth. People who know little overestimate what they know, and people who know a lot start to doubt even what's obvious. Knowledge brings humility, ignorance brings certainty, and in an argument, certainty beats doubt. Always. Not because it's true, but because it's louder. Think about the last time you tried to explain something complex to someone whose mind was already closed. You felt that frustration growing, that silent desperation of realizing that every word you spoke was being distorted or ignored. You started questioning yourself. Am I being clear enough? Does my argument have flaws? And while you drown in self-criticism, the other person is absolutely convinced they destroyed you with an argument that barely makes sense. This isn't just frustrating, it's philosophically disturbing, because it reveals something fundamental about how truth works in the human world. Truth doesn't win on its own. It needs to be accepted, and acceptance doesn't depend on logic. It depends on emotion, on identity, on ego. When you challenge someone's belief with facts, you're not attacking an idea, you're attacking who that person believes they are. And nobody, absolutely nobody, will let you destroy the image they have of themselves just because you're right. Aristotle knew this over 2,000 years ago. He said there are three forms of persuasion: logos, pathos, and ethos, logic, emotion, and character. Smart people trust logos too much. They think that if they present the right argument in the right order, with the right evidence, truth will shine and everyone will bow before it. But the idiot, they ignore logos completely. They go straight for pathos, messing with your emotions, making you feel attacked, frustrated, inferior. And when you lose your patience, they've won, because now you no longer look intelligent, you look emotional, defensive, arrogant. And here's an even more bitter truth. Arguing with idiots transforms you. You start oversimplifying your arguments to be understood. You start repeating the same things like a parrot. You lower your level of discourse to reach theirs, and suddenly you realize you're no longer debating ideas, you're fighting for validation. You don't want to be right, you want them to admit they're wrong, but they'll never admit it, because for them, admitting error is admitting weakness. And in their mind, weakness is worse than being wrong. If this idea has already resonated with you, imagine what comes next. Subscribe so you don't miss this journey, because what we're about to explore will completely change how you see these situations. Let's go deeper. Why does this hurt so much? Why does losing an argument to someone visibly less informed cut so deep? Because it touches something primitive in us. The desire to be recognized, validated, understood. When you spend years studying, reading, thinking, you create an unconscious expectation that your knowledge will be respected, that when you speak, people will listen, that truth will matter. And when you realize it doesn't matter, that your knowledge is irrelevant in the face of someone's stubbornness, something inside you breaks a little. This isn't weakness, it's humanity. We all want to believe we live in a world where effort and reason are rewarded. But the reality is, we live in a world where volume and confidence often beat substance, and accepting this is painful. It's recognizing that being smart isn't always enough, that sometimes the dumbest person in the room has more power simply because they're not afraid of being wrong. Socrates was executed by people less wise than him. Galileo was silenced by the church. Alan Turing was persecuted despite having saved millions of lives. History is full of examples of brilliant people being destroyed by ignorant crowds, and the reason is always the same. Intelligence threatens. It exposes comfortable lies. It questions fragile authorities. It asks people to think, and thinking hurts. It's easier to attack the messenger than accept the message. So when you lose an argument to an idiot, you're not just losing a conversation. You're reliving a millennia-old pattern of humanity, the eternal conflict between knowledge and ignorance, between reason and emotion, between truth and comfort. And historically, comfort wins. It always has. Because truth demands courage, and courage is rare. But here's what nobody tells you. You don't need to win. That's the great illusion. You think if you don't convince the person, you've lost. But what if the goal was never to convince? What if the true purpose of debate isn't to change the idiot's mind, but to strengthen yours? Because every time you articulate your thoughts, you understand them better. Every time you defend an idea, you test it. Every time someone challenges you, even stupidly, you're forced to think more deeply about why you believe what you believe. The Stoics had a concept called amor fati, love your fate, accept everything that happens as necessary. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you argue with an idiot, you have no power over their mind, but you have power over your reaction. You can choose not to let their ignorance diminish you. You can choose to see the conversation not as a battle to be won, but as an exercise in patience and mental clarity. This doesn't mean being passive, it means being strategic. Knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, recognizing that not every battle deserves to be fought, that sometimes the smartest act is simply to walk away. Because your mental energy, your inner peace, your sanity are worth more than proving a point to someone who lacks the capacity or willingness to understand. But there's an even deeper secret that few people know, something that changes everything when you truly comprehend it. The idiot isn't your enemy, they're your mirror. Every time you get frustrated with their stubbornness, you're seeing your own stubbornness. Every time you get irritated with their refusal to listen, you're seeing your own refusal to accept that not everyone wants or can listen. Every time you insist on being right, you're playing exactly the same game they are, the ego game. Because deep down, what's the difference between an idiot who won't accept being wrong and a smart person who needs to prove they're right? Both are trapped in the same snare. The need for external validation. The idiot seeks validation through empty victory. The intelligent person seeks validation through intellectual recognition. But both are looking outside for what they can only find inside, the certainty of their own worth. Rumi, the Sufi poet, said, "Beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there." That field is where true wisdom lives. Not in victory, not in defeat, but in transcending the very need to win. When you reach that place, arguments with idiots stop affecting you, because you're no longer playing their game. You're no longer measuring your value by the ability to convince anyone. You simply are, complete in yourself, without needing anyone to agree with you to know you have value. And then something magical happens. You become impossible to defeat. Not because you win every argument, but because you stop seeing arguments as something to be won. You begin to see conversations as exchanges, not as combat. And when someone attacks you with ignorance, you don't attack back. You simply observe, with curiosity, even with compassion, because you understand that ignorance is suffering, that living trapped in fragile certainties, defending comfortable lies, is a prison. And you feel pity, not anger. This isn't superiority. It's liberation. It's finally understanding that there's no real victory in proving someone is stupid, that the only victory that matters is the inner peace of not needing to prove anything to anyone. So when you encounter the next idiot, and you will, because they're everywhere, remember, they have no power over you unless you give them that power. Every time you get frustrated, you're giving power. Every time you lose your patience, you're losing yourself. Every time you lower your level to theirs, you become what you despise. Be water, as Bruce Lee said. Water doesn't fight rocks. It flows around them. It adapts. And with enough time, it erodes even the hardest mountain. Not with force, but with consistency. Not with anger, but with serenity. Be water, flow, and let the idiots fight their own shadows while you move forward, light, free, untouchable. The greatest intelligence isn't in winning arguments. It's in knowing which battles to fight and which battles to leave behind. It's in recognizing that your peace is worth more than your reason, that your happiness is worth more than being right, that your life is too short to be wasted trying to illuminate those who've chosen darkness. If this journey touched something in you, if these words resonated in some corner of your soul, don't let this revelation die here. Like this video, leave a comment sharing your own experience with impossible arguments, and subscribe to this channel so we can continue exploring together these profound truths that nobody else has the courage to speak. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who lives frustrated trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced, share it. Because sometimes the right message at the right moment can free someone from a prison they didn't even know they were living in. You're stronger than you think, and freer than you know.